What is going on, guys? And welcome back to the process of becoming. My name is Dino, and I got a special guest today. You guys have actually heard me reference him a lot, actually. So it's going to be a good time. Welcome, Gabriel Deieno. So it's going to be a great time because this man, just so you guys know, so I'll kind of give you a little bit of background. This guy works with athletes of all kinds, like whether you are, just starting out in your fit like journey and you're trying to make it to the next level, or if you've made it to some of the highest levels possible and you still want to continue to grow, this man is like the ultimate key. He is the Tim Grover to the Michael Jordan. Okay, like he's top notch. So Gabriel, here's the cool part, man, and I think I shared this story with you very early on. But when I was about 22, 23, so this was 2018, 2017, I actually bought one of your books. It was one of your first books, I believe. It was the online course. I actually still have it on my phone, just so you know, it's still there. And dude, it was at a time where I, obviously wanted to take my professional game serious. And I never really knew how, right? Like I did the daily practice of like the actual physical side of things, but I always knew there was something more, So oddly enough, my fiance ended up finding your page and she's like, "Oh, check this out." And she bought your book for my birthday. And I remember I was like, man, like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I took so the first month I was like, I dove all in, you know, and I remember just diving in, and it was like, whoa, this feels different, and it obviously took a little bit, and this, it's you kind of have to practice every day to get to that spot. But I remember I was like meditating consistently, like 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, visualizing, going through all the little detail things. And man, in 3 months, my game improved honestly 10 times more than it did me practicing alone. And it almost seemed like you figured out a key. So the cool part about this is obviously I didn't chase the professional football route, but I chased career, and I used those same things in my career to the point that I even visualized certain scenarios that have happened in my career that I was kind of like, let me just see if this works on this side, right? And I'll give you a quick story. There was one meeting I was, visualizing getting promoted in front of the entire company. It's obviously a big accomplishment, big achievement. And, so I started visualizing that. And man, it happened to almost exactly a T. Like I might have been off like just a little bit. But brother, you helped me unlock that. And I want you to know just how big of a role you played in my life with teaching me these things. And I know I'm one of, so many that you've already impacted, continue to impact, and only going to impact even more people. So I just thought it was a really cool story, and just how, the full circle of life is happening right now. So it's pretty cool. But Gabriel, what I want to know, man, is really like, and I open the floor to you, like tell us about you, tell us about your journey. How did this even become a thing for you? How did you start going down this route?
Yeah, well, I'm extremely excited to be here, man. Really, really excited. I am very happy to hear all of this. Obviously, you shared a lot of this with me already, but still feels like the first time that I'm hearing it. So I'm very happy and very, very, very excited to be here. And I'm glad that I could help in a bit, in a way. And yeah, here we are, 8 years later. It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man, like it all started, actually back at the time was just getting started, 2017. It was like right at the beginning of that. I started on May 2017, so it was right at that time. And I was looking for answers. I was probably in the same position as you were. I was playing football, soccer back at the time. I wasn't improving as much as I wanted. I wasn't performing the way that I knew that I could perform. So I started like trying to really get my hands on anything that I could just to learn, just to improve, and really trying to find a solution. And back at that time, I came across books and podcasts and interviews and a bunch of things and was literally trying everything that I could and pretty much documenting that process into what later became the ebook, the Winner Mindset ebook that you have back at that time. And I just want to pretty much organize those things for myself so I could use them. And then I had the idea, okay, what if I share this stuff? What if I try to give to other athletes? And if you think about Instagram or any online business back in
Mhm.
2017, it was a different world. 8 years
Absolutely.
ago, it was everything was different. And yeah, that's how it started. Like I was trying to just find a solution for myself, trying to get out of that hole that I was in. And yeah, and then I thought of what if I make something out of this? And then only 2 years later that I decided to go into a psychology degree in college. And then I said, okay, this is actually my purpose, my mission, my passion, my what I'm gonna do in life. And then I started to pretty much make it more professional, take it more seriously. And then I got a degree, master's degree in sports psychology, and then now over the last few years working day to day with athletes.
Dude, that's incredible, man. I kind of want to know a little bit more about even like your early life. Like what drew you to soccer in the first place? Like how was it like growing up for you? Because you're originally from Brazil, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yep.
yes,
Perfect. And just so people know too, you have a new book out. Okay. It's called The Daily Athlete. Phenomenal
yes.
book. Honestly, even if you're not an athlete, I highly, highly recommend it. If you have kids who are athletes, it is, I mean, no matter what age group you are in, you can truly grab so many different lessons. And to, again, to my point, even if you're not an athlete, the lessons in there can apply to your life no matter what you're doing. So just want to throw that out there too.
Yeah. Thank you for the sponsorship.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah. Like in Brazil, if you play sport, it's 95% chances you're playing football, soccer. So that's how I came across that. That's pretty much cultural, but I just enjoyed it too much. Like every day playing with friends, playing at clubs, playing in different places. So I'd say I started playing at around 5, like training at an environment specifically for training at around 5 or 6. Then when I was 11, that I was pretty much more conscious of what it takes to do these things, where these things are going to lead me to. I started to take it more seriously, to training more regularly, to creating more expectations, to putting in more effort. So then when we're 13, 14, the effort increases, you have more expectations. If you have any idea of how that works for the ones who are listening, it's like you are a pro by 14 years old. Your routines are like of a pro. So I was really trying to improve. I was training every day, doing everything, and struggling. Like at that time, that was when things started in a way. I still pushed through, still had no idea what psychology was. So pretty much no way of getting out of that place. We're just like physical training. But it was my passion. Like it was never like a burden, never a sacrifice. It was my passion. And that was the thing that I wanted to do. I woke up in the morning, this is what I want to do. I went to sleep at night, this is what I want to do tomorrow. So every day was getting involved with that passion. And there's the paradox of passion. You love that so much, but you can't live without it. So when things are not going well, you feel it. The harms your emotions.
That's awesome, man. And honestly, with where you're at now, obviously soccer has always been that thing for you. How do you feel now with what you're doing? Do you feel like you have still, because you kind of said it early on, like you found your new purpose, or you kind of figured out this is the purpose for you. How long did that take, and when did it click for you that like this is the thing for me?
So I went through, I could call it a life crisis when when I decided that I was not gonna try to play soccer professionally anymore. So things were not working. I was getting injured and pretty much losing the passion to play, to train, and have those expectations. And I didn't know what to do in life. At the time, in college, I was taking a business administration course. And during that summer in 2019, I went through a life crisis working with a psychologist. I was thinking about what would I enjoy to do and do even if I was not getting paid a huge amount of money. And somehow I couldn't find the answer until I thought, okay, what am I doing now that I don't make money, but I love doing that? And that's when it clicked for me. And I said, yeah, it makes total sense. Like I'm still involved with soccer, which is has been my main passion since the early days. I'm involved with psychology, which has been my passion in the last 2 years. That's started to grow, and I'll do that for free. I am doing that for free now. So yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, dude, even something you just said is, you were trying to find what your passion is after the thing that you love the most. And I don't want to say it got taken away from you, but it was obviously not the route that you were going anymore. And it's funny because we talk about this on this podcast often of like finding your purpose, something that, no matter how, like, it's not about the money, it's about what would you love doing every day. And you said it there where I think is so important is look at what you're already doing that you love so much that you're already not getting paid for. And can you do that consistently? That's such an important piece, man, because I think we forget that often, where life is so short. And honestly, the only money you need is just to be able to survive. Right. And what I mean by that is, be able to afford food, housing, do all this stuff. If you're loving what you do and you can make just even that, you're good. I think, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Do you think, especially this day and age, we feel the need that we have to be millionaires or that we have to make so much money, even if we hate what we do, it's like we got to do this because, whether it's society, how they look at us or the things that we have or social media, like, do you feel that is something you see now or is kind of become an issue more that we kind of forget what our actual purpose is or don't find it because of those things?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. The main purpose of the brain is being able to solve problems. And when we don't have an actual problem, we're trying to create one so we can solve that with the expectation that solving the problem is going to bring something in return. That's our nature. So when our main concern was, can I get food and shelter? When I do that, I feel successful, I feel good. That's my mission. That's the only thing that I have to worry about. But today we have all or most people, if you live in a good country, you have all things that you need. You have shelter, you have food, you have water, you have uh, electricity, you have internet, which is not an essential thing. Most people have that. And then we start figuring out what we are supposed to do, what are the problems that we're supposed to solve. And now getting also in the topic of what I do with athletes, we're always playing a game, all of us. Either we are aware of that or not. And a lot of people are unconscious of the game that they're playing. So I can give you an example of an athlete. If the athlete is trying to play the game of approval or recognition and not playing the game of improving himself or trying to be the best player that he can be for the team, it's very easy to get lost into how do I accomplish that? So if we take that to your question, a lot of people are playing the game of how do I gain recognition through money, through achievements. And when that is the game that we're playing, and most people are playing that unconsciously, for the people who are playing this game, most of them are unconscious. It's very hard to get out of the game when you don't even know they were playing that game. So yes, I agree with you what you said, and of course there are levels to that of how much money it's needed. And probably you have already mentioned this in the podcast, but there's a very interesting study that happiness and income they correlates up until a specific level, and then a higher income has no effect on that level of happiness. So we can look at the philosophical side of that, that money is not going to buy happiness. We can look at the evidences, scientific evidences that it does not bring happiness. So yes, it doesn't. Like
Right.
actually, it doesn't. Obviously, at some point, it will have an effect because things matter. If you have more time, if you have more security, if you have more stability, yes, you are very likely to be happier. But if you're over that stage, it's not going to change anything. It's going to might promote a temporary relief. I feel happier with a new car. I feel happier that whatever, but it goes away.
Mhm.
And when you have that pretty much daily success of feeling like I am doing what I'm supposed to do, I am aligned with who I want to be, who I am with my core values, it's a satisfaction that it's not temporary. It's not
Absolutely.
something that you buy it and now it doesn't work anymore. You have to buy another one of that. It continues. It's a long-term thing.
Man, I love that so much. I think that statistic right there. I think even if you maybe don't feel that or you're like, I think he's wrong, just the statistic there shows you that that life gets taken to a different level because we're chasing something that doesn't even satisfy us anymore, right? And something I actually want to ask you about, and this is a perfect segue into this, but how can someone be more conscious of these things? Like, how would you, I know you obviously work with players on this, but how do you play the right game, so to say? And obviously, I know there's no such thing as a right game, but how do you become more aware of these things? How do you start chasing the things that actually matter? And maybe chasing is not the best word for it, but how do you have more happiness in your life doing the things that you know you should be because you're more aware of what actually matters to you?
Knowledge, it's the main thing. So knowing myself and knowing how things work. So in this situation, knowing that I have an immediate relief after I bite something. Okay, so why am I not as happy as I was 10 minutes ago? Like, why is that achievement not satisfying me anymore? So this consciousness of how I feel, why am I feeling anxious? Why am I feeling sad now? Why am I feeling happy about this? Why I wake up in the morning and I have no motivation? Why before going to sleep at night I am not able to sleep because I'm anxious? Like trying to pretty much listen to the inside. And when I'm playing a game that I'm not aware of the game and I'm just pretty much repeating the same loops, I am listening too much to the outside, to the Instagram fitness influencer who said that this is the basics, that this is, you gotta have this thing. So I'm seeking that thing. I'm listening too much to the external things, and then I become pretty much a product of the algorithm. Whatever it shows me, the people that are around me, the what's on TV, what my neighbor has, I'm listening. I'm too prone to absorb the external. So if I want to do the opposite, is switching that and listening to the internal, knowing what goes inside, how my body responds to each specific thing that I go through, and then knowledge itself. So pretty much what we are doing here for the ones who are listening, they are acquiring, hopefully, some good knowledge. And then that can be some sort of decision making in the process. So if you're listening to this and you make 150K a year and you're thinking, I feel like I need more, to feel happier. Oh, but there's a statistic that says that that's not true. So that kind of knowledge to pretty much shift your perspective to allow you to look for different solutions. And then obviously the knowledge of skills. How am I able to change this? How am I able to change my routines to look for different things that I'm passionate about? But that combination of the internal and then how to, so knowing where I am, where I want to go, and then how I am able to make those things happen. It's obviously a summary, but these are the, if we could do that, the two steps.
Man, I think those two steps are awesome because, I think a lot of life to figure out, even, when we were talking about your purpose and, happiness and really just overall health is asking yourself those questions. Because a lot of the reasons we are subconsciously doing these things is because we're so focused on the external things that we're not focused on what's actually happening on the inside. And even just some of those simple questions of why do I feel this way? Why am I sad when I do this, but I was happy, 10 minutes ago? Like what is going on there? And it's more than just knowing yourself, but it's also figuring out really the key to being happy long term and being successful in your own right. Because I think we have also this view of what success is based on those external factors. Especially when you look at the Instagram and you get fed this algorithm and you're like, well, this person's making this much. I got to be making this much or I'm not doing well. Right. And it's like, you got to understand that's not how this goes. There's a very interesting statistic that I saw a couple months ago, actually, but it looked at like, what is the average age of a first time home buyer? And it was, like 38 or 40 something. It was in that range, but you see people that are in their 20s or maybe 30s. They're like, oh my God, I haven't done it. It's like, hold on, man. Like, even if you look at averages, you're still not on track. Like, you're still doing fine, and then even there was another one and this one was actually really, I would say, mind blowing, but it looked at the average age of millionaires or someone who makes their first million or something along those lines. And it was like 67, right? And when you picture that, you're like, dude, I got 40, 50 years. I got 30 years. And, and obviously, maybe retirement's involved in there. But again, it's like, even if we just take a look at the averages, you are very well on track. But also, $1 million does not equate success, and it's because of basically these things that we're programmed to think. And basically what you're saying, and I love this a lot, man, because it requires that introspection. And introspection, I think, is the key, whether you're a professional soccer player, a football player, a mom, a dad, a teacher, a businessman, whatever it is. It's like that introspection is so important, because if you don't have that, there's only a matter of time that it kind of crashes all on you. And it's, I don't want to say too late, but it becomes a heavier thing that you have to carry long term. Right. Um, for you, what are some tips or things that you can put into your daily habits, obviously outside of the questioning, but like, for example, we talk a lot about journaling on the podcast, whether it's, gratitude things or just journaling out your thoughts. Like journaling in general can really help you clear the mind and figure out some answers, like what other things would you include in that, or even dive into journaling? Cause I feel like we haven't talked about this, but I think you're a big journaler, or, love this topic if I'm correct. And so I'd
Yeah,
love to
for
hear
sure.
more things that you can dive on that you can do daily, or even again, dive into journaling a little bit.
Yeah. Before I get into that, I want to make a connection to what we were discussing. So at the beginning, I mentioned that the brain is a problem-solving machine. So the idea is that it solves problems. And then I said that when we don't have a very clear problem or an obvious problem, it will look for problems to solve. And when we are too much on the external, we are going to absorb what are the problems that we are facing in that time. So if I'm speaking to an athlete, for him, it's very clear that the problem is you're not scoring enough goals, that you were not on team of the week enough, that you were not playing enough, that you were not on the best team yet. The same applies for every single human being. I am not in the position that I want to be yet. I'm not in the company that I want to be yet. I'm not living in the house that I want to live yet. That amount of money is not enough. All of these external perspectives, what it is communicating to the brain, which is essentially a problem solving machine, is that how do we figure out that problem? That is the main thing that's addressing at the moment. And we have a lot of research on this, that the simple act of watching somebody doing something makes us more prone to do the same. So if we take that at a very basic level, if I show you a video of somebody playing this, just throwing this around because they are extrinsically motivated, and then 5 minutes later I give you this, you're not going to do that. But if you're watching someone throwing this around and they are intrinsically motivated, you are likely to just play around with this. Now we are taking here the most basic level, a random human being doing some random activities. If we take that to a deeper layer, your brother is doing this because he loves it. What if I try that? If your neighbor has that car, I'm supposed to have that. He's my neighbor. He's on the same level, on the same street, on the same financial level. Their kids go to the same school as mine do. I gotta have that. I'm too open to the external. The problem solving that I'm gonna engage with is, how do I get to that level? How do I solve this problem that I'm facing right now? And when you ask me what are the exercises, what are the techniques, the habits, anything that can help to pretty much flip that around and listen more to the internal, any activity that connects with yourself. So for example, why am I going to do these? Why am I going to go running in the morning? Is it because everyone is doing that, or because I'm truly trying to connect with that experience and see how that goes? So on the most basic level, we can apply that to every single situation that we go through. It is just, how can I really connect to what I'm doing? How can I be more in the present moments? That's the main thing. Now, if obviously at some situations, at some activities, that's harder. But if you're looking into how do I listen to myself, it's, yeah, journaling. I think it's that act of listening to yourself, of writing down your thoughts and just seeing what they look like from a third person perspective. Meditation is also a big factor on that. Just so you can just watch your thoughts without getting involved with the emotions, without the perspectives that we hold most often. Speaking like therapy and coaching and these things, they have that purpose of asking you questions, of showing the directions, of analyzing different factors. It also helps tremendously. speaking to friends, like getting to a deeper level of intimacy with anybody. And that will help you understand yourself better and understand the other person better. So it's this game has no blueprint. We got to figure it out. We got to try things out. We got to collect the experiences and just try our best to choose what we're gonna do. To on that thing that I said about throwing these around. If you can just choose to I don't want to throw this or I want to throw this and see how it goes. I'm aware, I'm present, I'm connected to what I'm doing. It helps because I can live the experience instead of living the ideas and the expectations that were created based on somebody else's recommendation or interpretation.
Nailed that. I think that's, especially you said, being present and aware a ton, and it's again kind of even with like I love your example with the running piece because even if you take that right, which it's something that it's going to be good for all of us from the physical aspect, the health aspect, the mental health aspect. Running is important. It helps everyone, but it's why you are doing it. And it's crazy how just that one question really gets to the root of like, am I doing this just because someone else is doing this? Or am I doing this, like you said, for the experience? Am I doing this for myself? Because that right there changes things so much, right? Like, we see a lot of people do different things in life. And obviously, if you're a soccer player, there's a lot of similarities. But even as a soccer player or as a parent, are you doing these things because other people are doing them? Or is this for you? And I think that's such an important question to ask yourself because it allows you to be present, but it also allows you to actually get the full benefit of what you are doing. And another thing that you said that I loved as well is like there's no blueprint to this. And as humans, and you get this a lot with soccer players, like what do I got to do? Like what is the answer? Like I got to have the answer. What's the one thing for me? And you've studied plenty of athletes from some of the greatest of all time and coaches as well. And I bet you see this too. There is no right answer, right? They all have a different, I would say, philosophy, but you got to try different things to find out what that thing is for you. And I think that's again, it's a beautiful thing because a lot of us, we have maybe I don't want to call it idol worshiping or idols, but there's people that we look up to because they have done something that maybe we're trying to achieve. And oftentimes I think we try to replicate that blueprint exactly. And I think there's certain things you can grab, but again, it's finding what is your blueprint, so to say, right? Again, there's no blueprint, but what works for you, because what works for Messi doesn't work for Ronaldo, right? They're two completely
Exactly.
different players, and it's even if you look at like, for example, some of the biggest midfielders, and I know a lot of you guys listening might not know soccer, but this is our time to geek out a little bit. But when you look at like a Xavi or a Modric, it's like two different play styles, and what they do to get there is completely different. But to say one works over the other is inaccurate. You know what I mean? It's like they all have to find their own way. So for you, another question I kind of want to dive into on this is with the players that you have, obviously coached, guided through this process. What is one of the biggest common things that you get that you would say relates to humans as well? And obviously, I know the central nervous system of just how we operate as humans, how the brain operates, but other things that you have seen that is very common with athletes that can relate very well to anybody, like issue wise, that you're like, okay, all of them kind of have this, but it also relates over here. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I would say it's relating our self-esteem to an end result. And like working with athletes, I feel like this becomes more apparent because there's a more specific deadline. So you're
Hmm.
playing the 25, 26 season. At the end of that season, you're going to know if it was a success or a failure, if you won or not. So it's very specific. That pressure that it's binary, it's a yes or no, success or failure. It promotes a higher level of pressure, a higher level of anxiety. And when we are relating our self esteem, who we are, our self image to that specific outcome, I am the best player on this league. I am a winner. I am the top scorer. I am a star of this team. It's very easy to get lost on that. When I don't achieve that, one week I'm starring, the other week I'm not. One week I'm successful, the other week I'm not successful. relating our identities too much to the end result, to any sort of end result, it's harmful. It's bad. It's going to have serious consequences. When you are not an athlete and you take that, if I don't make this amount of money or if I don't get that promotion, it's something that still, at least for most people, it's going to have a bit more flexibility. I didn't get that promotion this month, but I might get next month, but still, it impacts a lot.
Mm.
And as we start playing this game of achieving something so I can feel good about myself, it's endless because you never get into a position of now I am at the top of the mountain. And even if you are, you got to maintain yourself there, which is even more. I am already this thing, but now I don't want to lose that. It brings more anxiety, more pressure. So I like to use this analogy of imagine that you are sitting on a chair and each of the legs of the chair it represents one part of your identity. If you're able to see your identity on a chair that has 7 legs, you're quite well stable if you miss 1 or 2 legs. If you rely your identity on 1 leg, 2 legs, 3 legs, when you lose one of those, you are left with nothing or one, which is not going to give you any stability.
Yeah.
So this in psychology we call that performance-based identity. I identify with the way that I perform, with my success. And that is a very common problem. And then we can go back to we're listening too much to the external, and now the externals are a lot louder than they were 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So we have social media, we have Instagram, we have TikTok, we have anything within a 1 second effort, no effort, just 1 second away from me, accessible at any time. So it's very easy to get so tuned with those ideas that they become the reality. They feel extremely real. And we see that with kids nowadays, how much they are into that, how much they feel like their life is that, is their social media, their recognition.
Dude, I love that analogy. And I know I've said a lot, I love a lot of things, but it's because the way you connect these dots, I think is so important for a lot of us because one, a lot of the things that you've been talking about relate so much to the audience that we have. You know, again, not everyone here is an athlete or maybe was a former athlete, but life is just different for everyone. And everyone's in their own category of what they're trying to figure out and, different areas of life. But it's crazy how all this relates. And the question I want to ask you to this is when it comes to identity, you know, what is the best way to truly build that stable chair, right? Like, what is the best way to continue to be stable? Um, and two, on this as well, is how do you change that perspective of success or failure? Yes or no, right? Because I think we could both agree on this is, and there's actually so a basketball player. I don't know if you've seen this clip. It's from Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know how you say his last name. And there was
Yes,
a
yes, I've seen that.
reporter. I figured but for the audience, there's a reporter, and he asked him like, basically, how do you feel about the failure of the season, or like basically losing, like, oh, you guys suck, like, and he's like, wait, what do you like? Just wait, and he's like, he just couldn't comprehend that he was being asked like this season is a failure because we didn't win the championship. Like, is that what equates to success? Like, if I don't win, we're terrible. And he asked him, he's like, basically like, hey, how did you do last year? Did you get a promotion? He's like, no. He's like, okay, well, did you fail then? And I think that's such an important piece because, I think for athletes, we look at that as a success or failure right away. Like that's just kind of, I think the mindset of when you're watching a game, it's either win or lose. And outside of that, there's no moving forward. It's more perfectionism over progress. It's like, hey, if we're eighth last year, but then we went up to fifth, like that's not a failure. We're moving forward. But oftentimes we don't see that. So I would like to know your thoughts on how you can switch that mindset, or what are some ways to maybe track the progress over the perfection or over the recognition or achievements.
Yeah, that's a bit complex, but yeah,
For
I
sure, for
love that.
sure.
I love that. I love that. Um, yeah, so on the definition of success, The way that we communicate things and the things that we expose ourselves to, they become the pieces that the brain is going to use to solve problems in the future. So if I'm feeding myself pieces, they're telling me success, failure. When you succeed, you are great. When you fail, you are awful. People don't like you. When you are to solve a problem, okay, how do I become happier? How do I become more respected? How do I become more valued? Your brain starts to process those things with the pieces that it was given before, and it's going to process, you got to win. You got to be the best. You got to avoid mistakes. So if we're trying to change how the mechanism is operating, we're going to feed the brain with things that tell me that, hold on, it's not a yes or no. It's not a success or failure. It's how do I improve? How do I get better? How do I learn? How do I listen more to myself? And for me to give myself more of those pieces, I need to pretty much improve my ability to learn, to acquire more knowledge in different topics. And that goes along with all things that we're saying. If we are consuming things, and especially nowadays, the more extreme that you are, the more likely to go viral you become. So when you go on social media, it's a representation of the world that is extremely on the extremes for anything, on the political side, on the financial side, on the sports side. Every time that you are extreme, everywhere that you are binary, things perform better. So essentially, we are consuming more of those things. As we consume more, we are more prone to interpret things in that way. The way that we communicate is shaping the way that we interpret things to be. So if I'm looking all the time, this is a failure, this is a success, this guy is the best, this guy knows how to make 10 figures a month, and all these things, they are going to shape our interpretation of the world. So this consumption side is extremely important. And then we go again, listening to the inside is going to give you a lot more answers than on the outside, because the outside is subjective. It is for one person, as you said, it might work for that player, but might not work for you. There's no blueprint. And and then you said about the identity. How do we rely there on things that are more stable, that are more diversified? And essentially, you want to be multiple things in life and associate mostly to how you do things and less to what you do. So, for example, as a soccer player, if I am associated, if my identity is too attached to being the top scorer or being the best player and not so much on playing football, that's a lot more fragile. Or the way that I do things, excellence, discipline, uh, openness, connections. If that is the way that I do things, and then I'm able to apply that to soccer player, to a dad, to a husband, to a son, to a friend, to part of the community, to anything I do, even if I lose a game, if we lose the championship, I'm still that guy. I still do things the same way. But when I'm feeding my brain that the way to solve a problem is to win, is to getting the recognition. In return, what I'm getting is I'm sitting my identity on a chair of one leg, and eventually the leg is not going to be there. And this is why we see a lot of youth players just burned out of the sport because they spend so much of their young years battling with that. Am I successful? Am I going to make it? Am I good enough? Do people like me? To the point of when one thing doesn't work out, when that leg is taken from them, there's nothing left. So they give up. They stop playing. They're burned out. And the same happens obviously at different levels, at different ages, to all of us. If we're relying on the identity of one thing only or one thing that's related to the outcome, you're going to fail.
Would you, in this example that you're giving, would because I feel like this ties in a lot to the core value piece where, your core values keep you stable because, again, it's not performance based, but it's more so based on like the person that you are. It's very similar to, like let's say, something happens, but, and it's not perfect, of course, because nothing's ever perfect. But if you can still pull those things out that were beneficial or positive, it keeps those legs stable, right? It's kind of like the equivalent of, like, let's say, you have a really bad training or a bad game or a really good game. It's like you're trying to pull out both things that you can improve, but also both things, whether good or bad, what you did well, right? It's almost like kind of one of those things where, let's say it's a conversation, and let's say you say something that you didn't mean or whatever. If you can pull it back and be like, hey, my intent wasn't that. This is, obviously my core value here is to be a benefit, or to truly be respectful to people. Did I still keep that, right? I hope that makes sense. But I think it's one of those things where those core values kind of keep you stable for the most part. But again, it's also being able to pull out those things from, whether, again, if it's a good performance, bad performance, whether it's in your career or being a mom or dad, like what went well, what you can improve on. And it's not just attaching your identity to that thing of like yes or no, very binary kind of thing. Would you agree with that? Like that the core values play a big role in keeping that chair stable, so to say?
Yes, 100%. 100%. The easiest way to define how I do things is through my core values. So essentially, they're going to allow me to be stable over time. And when we say this, that we're going to be stable, it doesn't mean they're going to be emotionless or that we're going to be on the same level consistently. No, it just means that the range, it's much smaller. That you don't go from 0 to 100 in 2 days. They have a range that limits how much you're going to get down, sometimes how much you're going to get high, but in a positive way. You don't want to feel like you are in the best player in the world after you score 2 goals in the second division. Because if that happens, the next day you might feel too down because you didn't score a single goal in the second division. So having that stability, what that represents as a lower range, a smaller, shorter range, and not that you are the same, that you don't experience an emotion. And also going along with that is allowing ourselves to experience. So if I feel bad, I feel bad, and that's fine. That's part of the process. I'm not trying to change how things are. I'm not trying to control the external events to fulfill my inside, my emotional states. So that flexibility of knowing who I am, knowing that I can expose myself to things that might go wrong, but still having that security that if things go wrong, I'm still myself.
Man, that's that point, and I like it a lot because so I've obviously been in health and fitness for a very long time, and you see this when someone starts their journey, whether it's losing a bunch of weight or building muscle, whatever the case may be. It's very easy to let one decision kind of make it seem like you're going downhill. Where it's like, hey, let's say you go 3 weeks great, but then you make that one bad decision where you might eat a little bit more or whatever the case is. And instead of looking at it like, hey, it's okay, like let me feel it, like, okay, I messed up, it's okay. What's the next best thing I can kind of do there? We end up taking that as like our downfall. Like, oh, I made one, that's not me, I'm done. And it's kind of talking about the 0 to 100 mindset, right? And instead of us kind of looking at like, so a great example I always tell people when it comes to their diet is because all of us want to still have an occasional pizza or a burger. You don't have to be 100% strict. And it's kind of like this 80-20 rule where like 80% of the time you do great, 20% it's okay if you mess up, right? Because no one expects you to be perfect. But if you, again, associate with that mindset of perfectionism, you're more likely to fail, right? And I say fail as, even that word kind of can trigger a lot of people. But what I mean by that is essentially throw you off your routine, throw you in a dark hole, throw you in, you kind of give up, right? Where, again, you hear this from athletes and coaches all the time, but never give up. And I think that quote alone is so important because on the basic level, it makes a lot of sense. But even if you dive deeper, it is truly the key to living a better life, living a healthier life, being successful in your own right with whatever you're doing, right? Because even if you make mistakes, even if you mess up, it's like, all right, new day tomorrow. Okay, what can I do differently? And I think that gets lost because of the external things that we see, and we're kind of judging ourselves day to day and forget that we're kind of sometimes playing in this long game, because again, as a soccer player, I could practice 2 days in a row, 5 hours. By the third day, I'm not going to be messy, right? Like I'm not going to perform amazing. Like things can't change that quickly, right? It's habits that you build, and something that, and I forgot exactly what number on in the book that you talked about in the Daily Athlete, but you talked about basically just looking at your habits more than you look at the result, right? Where it's like, okay, if I can stay consistent with these habits, that's really how you can look at your day as a win, so to say, right? And I know those terms can sometimes throw people off as well, but it's more so like, hey, how well did I do today is based on your habits, not always the result that you got, because you're not going to lose 5 pounds in 2 days. Like if you do, it's actually bad, right? But it's like, what did I do today to move forward? And when you hear that, is that similar? I'd like to dive into that part of it, right? Like when you look at your habits, why are they so important? What's a really good way to get out of, and I know we touched on a little bit, but the results on the long term, and just look at more of the day to day, be more present. Like what's a really good way to do that and still see the progress that you're making without feeling bad that, you're not there yet, kind of thing.
Yeah, essentially, when we are measuring progress through my own actions, so through my habits, we're listening more to the inside. And when I'm looking more at my progress through the lens of any statistic, any number, I'm giving more eyes to the extra. So when you say losing weight, you can say that yes, the number says how heavy I am, and that's my responsibility. That's on me. Yes, but not completely, because as you said, on the short term, you might be sick and lose a few pounds that day. It doesn't mean that you're progressing. It doesn't mean that you're getting better. It's the concept of a shortcut. You got better, but it's not gonna be sustainable. It's not gonna stick on the long run. And when we are measuring through habits, when I'm really tracking my progress based on the actions that I'm taking, based on my emotional control, my emotional states, on the way that I think, on the way that I operate, that is the system. It's as if we're improving that problem solving machine and making that better, making that function in a way that if just replace what I am sort of programming it to do, it's gonna have a compound effect in the long term. And in addition to this, one of the most important things for motivation and confidence is feeling autonomous. When I feel like I am in control, I am more likely to do it. That's why the victim mindset is so bad if you're helpless. When we're measuring progress through habits, I am putting myself as the accountant of the progress. I see how much I improve. I determine how good that was. And that is going to give a lot more confidence on the long run because essentially I am the one responsible for this. I am the one who's going to make it better or worse day to day. And when I put myself in that position, as uncomfortable as that might be for a lot of people, that is going to promote a lot of benefits long term. It includes pain, it includes more responsibility, but it also allows you a much better range for progress.
I think the process of being in control is something that I think we all crave and need, and it's the key to the long term happiness. But I think again, we look so much for the external that we forget that we're actually in control more than we actually think we are, right? And it's funny, man, because there's something that we've spoken about before, but when it comes to like reading, and knowledge, one thing I agree with you so much is that knowledge is the key to so many different things because it opens up so many different doors. And when you look at something like let's say reading 10 pages a day, which is something we talk about often. If you read 10 pages a day for an entire year, that's over 3,650. That's about 3,650 pages. I mean, a book is typically like 300. So you're like, 30 books in a year. And it's such a small habit that you're doing, but you're in control of it, right? And when you look at the concept of even confidence, you build more confidence in yourself. And something that I think is so important, whether again you're an athlete or whether you're just doing something else, whether it's career, business, parent, whatever it is being able to stack those little things. And you start with like one thing, and building the confidence will allow you to start something else. And it's natural because again, we try to go 100 to 0 or 0 to 100. I mean, even with our habits too, because a lot of us, again, we try to do everything all at once. And then we're like, yeah, but how fast do you feel burned out? Immediately, all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you're right back to where you started. But if you can start building your confidence slowly or taking it where you're at, because again, everyone is different, but start where you're at, build one thing, and then you're going to start to see the confidence grow. And then all of a sudden now it's easier to do another thing because you're naturally going to want to do it. And I think there's a book that actually talks about this. I can't remember at the top of my head. It might be Atomic Habits, could be completely wrong on that. But it's such a powerful thing, man, because all it takes is one decision, one thing to start today and continue to do that to build confidence. And that confidence alone will translate over into you wanting to do more, wanting to do better. And it'll shift so many things in your life, right? Gabriel, another thing I wanted to kind of talk to you about too with this is, within life, right? Because again, I think athletes and other people outside of this, and I know you work with some high level athletes. I think we all struggle with a lot of the same things, and sometimes we don't see the correlation there. If you're, when you're looking from the outside in, it's so much easier to judge and be like, our problems are different, or, our brain is different. But in reality, you've said how many times they're all very much alike. For someone's just starting out, whether it's, let's say, whether they're in soccer or whether they're, whatever the case may be, is there a certain plan that you have that you kind of go through to keep yourself on track or start building those habits? Like, what would you go through to start moving forward with that? I hope that makes sense.
With the habits.
Yes. Yeah. Like, what are some things that you would start to kind of do to move forward in that right direction? Let's say you're kind of starting at ground one, like very basic level. Like, what is a piece of advice or things that you do that start moving you forward in that?
Yeah, so there's a study on habit formation that they were trying to identify how long it takes to create a habit. And they were defining a habit as an activity that you do for at least either 90 or 95% of the time automatically. So pretty much something that you do every single day, like brushing your teeth.
Right.
And they were trying to figure out how long it takes to create a habit. And the answer that they came up with was, I'm not sure if it was 32 or 42. So between, let's say, 32 up until 240 days. So there's a massive margin on this. And when analyzing the differences, and this is my interpretation, when we're analyzing the differences that it takes to create a new habits, there are many things there. It is not just about the repetition. So a lot of people say that if you do a habit for 30 days in a row or an activity for 30 days in a row, it becomes a habit. It depends. It depends on how enjoyable the habit is. How much I like to think of that as a ratio between the stress and the reward. If the stress is much higher than the reward, my guess is you're not going to do it for long. Unless you have a very clear purpose or a very clear pain, you're not going to do it for long. And the thing is, that is subjective. The pain and the reward are subjective. So if I can play around with those things, it's much easier for me to be consistent with the habit. So let's say reading. If I want to read at night, after a long day, I'm stressed. My TV is on, the book is on the shelf, and there's someone by my side watching reels. It will be extremely stressful for me to read in a situation like that. There's not enough willpower in any brain in the world that's going to be able to survive that goal. It's going to be able to create that habit. But if you are reading in the morning, in the sun, on silence, after you just had a breakfast, without using your phone, and your book is right there on the kitchen, right where I have your breakfast, how likely are you to do that? So it's the same activity. It's reading a book, let's say 10 minutes a day. How more likely are you to conclude that task in these two different scenarios? So if ground one, if I am to start with a new athlete, everything we do, especially at the beginning, what I always say is, I just want you to try. I'm not give you a specific duration for the meditation or for the visualization. I'm not going to demand that you do 3 times a week. I just want you to try. Can you try it once or twice until we speak again? Okay. As we move forward with that, as we perceive the rewards of that, I did this action, I did this activity, and it made me feel better. The level of reward increases. As I said, it's subjective. So if you can recognize that I'm getting better because of that, the level of reward goes up. And the level of stress, as we get used to that, goes lower. So that ratio now it's something that I am much more likely to do for 90% of the time automatically.
That's such a good example, man. That's such a good example because, when you really break it down that way, it it makes it seem like, okay, hey, maybe it's not me and it's not that I hate this thing. Maybe it's just that my timing could be a little bit off. Maybe I have to adjust some things. And again, kind of going back to what you said before, that there's no blueprint. This is, I think, a perfect example of that, right? And especially with a habit of like reading or even meditating. Hey, maybe you try it at night, it didn't work so well, I didn't want to do it. Maybe we move it to the morning, maybe it's a different scenario, maybe it's a different situation, maybe it's in the middle of the day. And again, it's not the same for everyone, right? But when you try those things, you start to really find what works for you, and then all of a sudden it becomes automatic, right? And so with meditation and visualization, I did a lot of those things in the morning. And it's funny. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast, but I started to do it in the bathtub, like right before I would take a shower. I would like just turn on the water and I would just sit there because it was quiet, right? It was like, I was about to get my reward, so to say, of like, everything's peaceful. I'm about to take a shower. You feel clean. And I was like, you know what? I'm relaxed right now. Let me just do it here. And I started to build off that, and it worked great. Like it was kind of, it was almost like you identify, like, okay, when I do this, I'm going to do this too. And I think there's obviously things that we can dive in on that part too, where you're almost, it's like habit stacking, so to say. And
Hmm.
habit stacking works great, especially again. And when you get into it, it becomes automatic, right? And I love that. So I just wanted to point that out, that, even you can have some of those things that become part of your habits, like another good one is, for example, like we've mentioned this, is walking and reading, or walking and listening to a podcast. Hey, maybe you want to listen to a podcast, but you're like, oh, what time? I don't want to just do it at home because I got kids. Okay, well, you go for a walk. Why don't you just throw it on there? Or hey, studying. This is another thing I used to do where I would study during my walks because, I would have a certain amount of time that I wanted to walk every day. And whether it be 30 minutes or 45 minutes, okay, cool. What can I do in these 45 minutes to learn, to get better, to improve myself? Okay, cool. Let's study some products. Let's study ingredients. Let's study, different studies. You start looking up different things, and again, knowledge and habit stacking. Like there's so many different things you can do.
Definitely. This is
Yeah,
one of the best strategies to lower the stress of a habit. So if I have, let's say, a to-do list that has six different things, it's stressful. That occupies more space in the prefrontal cortex. My working memory has to be more active because I have more stuff to do. So instead of having these six habits, what if I just have my night routine that I stretch, eat, meditate, journal, and read? It's my night routine. It's habit stacking. When I go through that, I go through all of those things in, let's say, 40 minutes, 1 hour.
right.
But that perception, that the interpretation of what that is, it's not a lot of stuff. It's the night routine. And if I can have just one night routine, that's one routine a day, and I have those things in there, how much those things are going to help in the long term? But obviously, to begin with, start with one, maybe two, maybe 5 minutes each, just to get used to that, just to perceive, to realize the benefits, just to get used to it. And then slowly you make that bigger as you notice the benefits.
That's actually such a good way to put it, man. Because we also want to have a hundred different to do list, 100 long thing to do list. But again, if you just look at it as like my nighttime routine, it becomes very simple. And I think we overcomplicate this a lot. And something we actually have talked about on this podcast is this thing called the power list. And your power list is essentially 5 things that you're going to get done today, and just those 5 things, nothing else, nothing more, just 5. And they could be really anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be habit stacking. It could even be like something you just want to get done for the day, but
Hmm.
it's essentially working off something very simple where it's, not excessive. It doesn't, we don't perceive it as too much because again, I like the
Hmm.
way you talk about that because perception is a big piece. It's with anything. It's kind of like if we all listen to one meeting together and there's 10 of us, we all get a different sense of how that meeting went, what we picked up, just because we're the way we perceive it. But it's again, it ties right into what you're saying with that, with just something simple, and start from there and then build up. Because those 5 things, again, it doesn't have to be anything monumental, but that could be life changing to what you are doing. And you don't even have to start with 5. You can start with 3, but something that we've mentioned is called a power list. So it's funny that you probably haven't ever gone into that route, but it's exactly similar in how we talk about things and how we move forward with building habits or in life. You know, Gabriel, another thing I wanted to ask you about, because it's a big topic. Everyone talks about it, and it's goal setting. And again, I think we've kind of touched on a little bit of like yes or no, the reward, or failure kind of piece. But what are your thoughts when it comes to setting goals? What are your thoughts with like, are they beneficial? How would you do it? What's really the key there? Or, again, what are your thoughts when you hear that, or, that process of life?
Yeah, as I said before, in psychology, everything depends. So there's no blueprint on setting goals. And yeah, there are some systems that are more likely to work and systems that are proven to help most people, or at least a significant portion of people. It is important to just know how that operates on you. So if I know that I'm somebody who becomes obsessed with goals, that I don't rest until I get to that point, is that what you want? Yeah, so set your goals. Is that not a thing that you were looking for? So don't set your goals. Or don't have that specifics of the goals that you were trying to achieve. But if I was to summarize of the system that I'm use most often with the athletes that I perceive they're going to have benefits from having those, which are most, but not all, is trying to break that down to very specifics. So the idea is that we have a direction that I want to go to. I want to play in the Premier League. I want to play a World Cup. Okay, that's meaningful to you. Yes, so we're going to work for that. But once you have the direction, what we have to do is create the map, the plan, the steps. And once we have the steps, we forget about the destination and we just focus on how can we take steps that are going to be enjoyable, they're going to challenge me, and essentially take me in that direction, but without obsessing on getting to the destination, to the outcome as soon as I can. The idea, one of my most important priorities or one of my most important roles working with athletes is being able to help them to be in the present moment, to help them enjoy the journey. And I should not be, at least the way I see it, I should not be another resource that creates anxiety, that creates pressure for those guys. They already have enough of that. Most of them internally, not even the externals. Internally, they have a lot of pressure from themselves. So if I can help them to channel that anxiety to things that are very specific, they're controllable, that they are able to call those things a success or failure. And if it's a failure, they can improve that themselves. It makes it a lot easier for them to go through the process, enjoying that, feel like they're in control instead of I need that outcome so then I can rest and relax and be fulfilled with my life.
Again, this is something we have talked about so many times on here. Reverse engineering, right? You take this big thing that you want and you reverse engineer it to what can I do every single day to move forward to that, and you kind of remove that, right? And again, I think this is so cool because you work with some of the highest level athletes out there. Like people who, when you want to talk about dedicated and discipline, and it's very, those guys are at that level. And again, when you think about just regular, and I don't want to say regular people because that's not the case. Everyone has their own challenges and goes through stuff, whether it's career, whether your mom, dad, whatever it is. But the process is very much similar, and how you go through. The only difference is just what you're doing or how you're doing it. But the same goal applies, and I think it's such an important piece for anyone out there listening is, we're a lot more alike than we can imagine, but at the same time, we also have to do the work to figure out what is it that we want to become, what is our path, what is our purpose, what is our passion, and those things can be different. But again, the process of all of it is similar, right? How we apply it might be a little bit different, but it's very similar, So I love that a lot. Gabriel, I know we're kind of coming up on time, and I know you got a few calls, so I kind of want to ask you and just leave. What do you want to leave the people with today? What is something that, whether it's a quote, whether it's a lesson, something that you want to leave everyone with, to help them remember that this is a process that never ends. So how do we enjoy it? What is your last final words that you want to kind of share with the people?
Yeah, that was on my mind just now, and I think it's the perfect way to summarize what we discussed today. It's imagine that you are when snowboarding with your friends. You're on the top of the mountain, and you are gonna snowboard. We're gonna just take the snow in there and have a good time. When you are at that point, would you like that you have the option that you have a shortcut for a helicopter to pick you up and take you to the final destination? Probably not. You want to take the ride. You want to go through the path. Life is a lot more, a much bigger mountain, a much bigger challenge to go through. And yet, most people wish that they had a helicopter to take them from the top of the mountain to take them to where they want to get to. And there's no point. When we think about it, when we have that idea, that belief, we're most likely playing the wrong game, playing the game of approval, playing the game of achievement, playing the game of protecting myself. And if you're playing that game, it's just on you to change the game they're playing, to change your perspectives, your beliefs, your coping mechanisms, to go through the path, to enjoy the things that you're going to go through, expose yourself to different situations, and trying to enjoy while you go through all of that. Because essentially, that's life. And if you're trying to skip to the end of that, there's essentially no point. So that's how the message that I want to leave of take the path, smile, enjoy, do the hard work, and remember that it's just a game. And if it's just a game, play the way that you want to play in a way that it's enjoyable for you.
Damn, you killed it, brother. I think your analogies, by the way, man, are so good. So I love them, and I think there's a lot of people that are gonna take a lot of value from this. And dude, I appreciate you making time to do this. I know you're a busy guy, so the fact that you're here, sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge it means a lot, not just to me, but to everyone listening. So guys, I appreciate you guys. As always, you guys know what to do. Like, leave us a comment, subscribe, do all those things. And then also please give Gabriel a follow. Gabriel, what are your Instagram social handles? Like, please share that with the people.
All everywhere, Athlete Mentality, YouTube, Instagram, Athlete Mentality are gonna find me. And yeah, I hope that everyone enjoyed it, had a good time. Leave in the comments your thoughts, share the video, and yeah, thank you very much for having me here. It was truly enjoyable to be here with you.
Likewise, brother. It was a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll end up doing this again soon. So, all right,
Definitely.
guys, thank you so much, and that's a wrap. Peace. Perfect.